Hey friends, before we get started, we have a quick announcement. Here at This Whole Life, we are committed to providing a podcast that is ad-free and not driven by other products or organizations. We want to build a community of real people who share values around our faith and daily mental and spiritual health. It's such a joy and a privilege to offer the resources and conversations of This Whole Life to our listening community at no cost. And the reality is it costs us money to produce and create this podcast. There are present costs to produce and host This Whole Life, as well as future costs as we expand the way the podcast reaches folks, especially with video.
So if This Whole Life has been valuable to you, we want to humbly ask you to return some of that value to us so that we can continue having these awesome conversations and offering practical tools for mental and spiritual health. How would you do that? That's a great question. You can become a supporter of This Whole Life through a service called Ko-Fi. Just visit ko-fi.com/thiswholelife to make a one-time or a recurring donation. So you can donate $5 one time or a monthly $20 donation or anything in between or beyond that. And if you're down for $100 a month, go for it. We would be so grateful. But regardless of your support level, just join the community, be a part of the family. Our initial goal during Lent of 2025 is $1,000 of support by Easter, and only you can help us get there. So click the link in the show notes below or visit ko-fi.com/thiswholelife. Thank you so much for your support. And now let's get to the episode.
God sees me in my weakness and he loves me there and he wants to meet me there. And I'm called to encounter others, my wife and my friends and everyone in the midst of my weakness has been really freeing for me.
Welcome to This Whole Life, a podcast for all of us seeking sanity and sanctity, and a place to find joy and meaning through the integration of faith and mental health. I'm Pat Millea, a Catholic speaker, musician, and leader, and I'm happy to bring you this podcast along with my bride, Kenna, a licensed marriage and family therapist. This is the stuff she and I talk about all the time, doing dishes, in the car, on a date. We're excited to bring you this podcast for educational purposes. It's not therapy or a substitute for mental health care. So come on in, have a seat at our dining room table, and join the conversation with us. We are so glad you're here.
So listen to me now. I'm not gonna stand here with my friends down and out.
Welcome back to This Whole Life, ladies and gentlemen. Emphasis on the gentleman, because for the first time in I'm pretty sure the history of This Whole Life, it is a room of only men. That is not true. Wow. It's not true. Father Nathan and I once did an entire episode about mental health in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
Right.
Which I don't think any women listening have appreciated very much, but we loved it no matter what you thought. Today, friends, we have the great pleasure of talking about men's relational health. When men are connected to other people, whether it's their wife, their parents, their kids, a best friend, what goes well in men's connections to others, and what are the pitfalls, the shortcomings, the weaknesses and temptations in relationships with men and others. And we've got an amazing panel of wise and attractive men to share their wisdom with us today. Although if you don't look at the video version of the podcast, you just catch the wisdom and not the handsomeness. Ben Baker, LMFT, is a therapist here at the Martin Center for Integration with us. If you are a longtime listener, you might remember him from episode 24, where we talked about men and mental health. Ben, welcome aboard. Welcome back. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your life, your family? What does your life look like nowadays?
Yeah, I think since I was on the podcast last, we had a baby. So I am married. I have 3 girls, 5, almost 3, and 1. So life is full and busy. I'm holding down the fort with the masculine gene at my house right now.
I was going to say, you bring the testosterone.
That's right. So yeah, that's kind of where life is at right now in a lot of ways. The warmer weather here in Minnesota, we've had a little spell recently, is making me just like hunger for spring, which for me means baseball is right around the corner, which is like hope springs eternal. So I'm in a hopeful spot today.
Excellent. Welcome to spring. Yeah. Yeah. It was like 60, 55 degrees yesterday, nice. I think what was it? 10 days earlier, it was 70 degrees colder than that.
Yeah.
Or at least felt
Yeah.
like that with the wind.
No,
It's just,
yeah, it was.
it's bananas. It's crazy. If it
Negative
was 70
17.
degrees hotter, it'd be 130 degrees. So awesome. Thanks. Glad you're back, Ben. New to the podcast, John Braun, another therapist with the Martin Center for Integration. Welcome aboard, brother. Can't wait to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about the Braun family and what you guys are up to.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Pat. Again, so my name is John Braun. I am married. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they are both young, rambunctious, amazing young boys. So we've got a lot of testosterone in our family, and I personally am absolutely loving that. Between the dirt and the taking things apart and the Nerf guns all over the place, I couldn't be happier. So just reveling in that and just having a young family and being married almost 5 years here. Getting excited to just celebrate that with my wife here. So
Beautiful.
Yeah, life is good.
I would love to see a side-by-side image of the toys from the Baker house and the toys from the Braun house, because something tells me not a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram right there. That's so great. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Great. Welcome, John. So good to have you. Andy Norton, welcome back, my brother. Good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Andy is one of our very talented and accomplished speakers with the Martin Center for Integration. So you get to go out into all kinds of parishes and organizations to talk about faith and mental health and sacraments and all the good things that the Lord has gifted you with. And again, longtime listeners, right after Ben, we weren't done because Andy was in episode 25 talking about integrated pathfinding, how spouses can move in the right direction together, hand in hand. Andy, what's new with you these days?
Gosh, what's new? I've been relearning chess. Been picking up chess again and playing with my boys. I've got 2 girls, 2 boys, and the boys have been loving it. They have been like telling me that I'm just the best dad, and they love me so much that I got them this chessboard. So yeah, they wake me up at like 5:30 a.m. We go downstairs and play chess together before school. So that's been great. That's been the big thing for me. And again, also enjoying the weather. It's been great.
Beautiful. I can't think of anything I would like to do at 5:30 in the morning, but chess is really far even down that list. That would be...
My kids get up real early, and if there's a board game or now chess that they want to play, I love it. I'm happy to wake up that early and play with them. It's a joy to be, just in it with them. And oh gosh, it's great. Although they make up a lot of new rules for chess. They don't, like the 5-year-old doesn't necessarily follow all the rules. He was playing it almost like a Mario game. Like they could bounce off each other and like do like combos. It was very cool. So
that's pretty fantastic. There are many ways that I admire all of you as fathers, but that little thing where your children wake you up at 5:30 and your brain says, "Sure, let's go play chess." I can't tell you the fury and rage that my children would receive if they woke me up at 5:30.
That's so funny.
For any reason at all, even to like play a game that I genuinely enjoy. Man, there are times that I am at my best, and 5:30 in the morning is not one of those times.
Yeah.
So well done. Good job, Dad.
Thanks. Happy to be here. And and especially in this company of these just very wise guys. I see myself as the POV character in this episode. I sort of bring up more questions than answers, and I'm excited to chat with you guys. So
I love that that's your second video game reference in like 4 minutes.
Shoot.
No, there's no limit. You do what you do. That's fine. I'm sure some guys that are listening will understand. Perfect. The 3 of us, I don't know about you guys, but the POV went over my head. That's fine.
That's funny.
Hey, great to have you guys. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I always appreciate having my bride around, but it's great to be among brothers too. So appreciate your presence. Like I mentioned at the top, we get to talk about men's relational health today, what it means and what it looks like when men are connected well to other people. Ben, John, you guys have clinical experience of working with individuals, couples, so you see all kinds of different relational systemic ways that men relate to other people, whether it's in a marriage, with their friends. Andy, you've been in ministry for many, many years with Focus and with Net Ministries. You've been married. All 4 of us are married. We've all got kind of anecdotal experience of friendships and families of origin and marriages and all that. I want to start with this, and partially for fun, partially because I think it might be an actual good transition to like get into the images of what this looks like tangibly. What are some images or characters out in pop culture, so maybe primarily like movies, TV shows, things like that, of men who are good examples of healthy relationships with others? And what are some examples of men who are pretty terrible examples of connection to other people? What comes to mind? What do you think?
I'll go first with more of a broader example, and this is going back maybe 25 years now, but I'm thinking Band of Brothers, the TV series, the small series.
Yeah.
That would just be an example in my mind of positive masculine, brotherhood. And there's some negative examples in there too. Of course, it's messy, it's gritty. It's not a show that you're going to show your kids for sure, but it is an example, I think, of men coming together, of getting through something together, of having each other's back, of really like being there for one another in vulnerable and weak spots. That makes me think of that. A negative example might be from the show Suits. I'm thinking of Harvey right off the top of my head. Though I think Harvey, you start to see more and more of it, more and more of his good side as the show goes along, right?
Yep.
But especially at first, he's kind of just out there for himself. He's going to be willing to, and I'm thinking Lewis as well, from that show, of like being willing to just like backstab anybody for the sake of getting kind of power and prestige within the show. And then you kind of see where that starts to falter. I'm not going to give any spoilers, right? But like that foundation of just like, I'm only out there for myself starts to crumble, which it does unless you're with, you have good friendships.
Yeah. Yeah. That's excellent.
Right. Yeah. A bad example to me I'm thinking of is a lot of shows have this dynamic, I think, but there's a show called Peaky Blinders. Definitely content warning on that. I could not get through more than one season. It was like, this is enough. I would not recommend it to everyone. But really the idea there being, I think it did show how friendship can lead you astray, can lead you into bad behavior. It can be negative when you have like a friendship that maybe is built on some solid foundations of like maybe family connections, that sort of thing, but it ends up leading you into maybe doing evil things. And I think I think there's a lot of examples of that in pop culture. Breaking Bad, all these other shows are very like kind of dark and show men connecting, but to do bad or to bring each other into something bad. And we know that there's good, healthy male relationships, but there's sort of a lot of just these examples of how it can go wrong, which I think is helpful if you take that, not to cast a bad light on all male friendships, but to know that actually you should be discerning in how you approach male friendships.
Yeah.
And then with a good example, I think of Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings and Éomer, but not in the movie. So in the movie, this is actually, people hate the way
you were going to tear the movie apart for this.
No, so I like the movies a lot, and people always complain about Faramir. But for me, it's Éomer is the one that I really feel like they did not do well. Because in the movie, Aragorn and Éomer, they like don't really trust each other. Éomer's very just grim and doesn't really, trust him or think he's really king material. But in the books, he respects Aragorn, and they, the whole idea of like, let this be the hour that we draw swords together. And it's this incredible example of coming together and building each other up and respecting each other and seeing each other really. And I love it. He's like, they have a lot of like male complex emotion, the two of them, and it's just great. And there's an epic scene in the Return of the King book where they like when Aragorn shows up with the army out of nowhere, and it's just beautiful. And Éomer like throws his sword up in the air, and it's awesome. So to me, like they're a great example of seeing each other, building each other up, drawing swords together, going shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't cheat and watch the movie.
Yeah. No,
you got to read the book to get this. Okay.
Yes,
that's great.
Totally.
John, anything come to mind for you?
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I mean, I'm not thinking of a negative example right now. I'm sure there's plenty, and I don't want to dwell on it, frankly, But to be completely honest, Pat, and this isn't just a stick for you, but when you asked that question, the first person that came to mind was Captain America. Yeah. It helps that my wife.
Thank you.
It helps that my wife and I have recently been working our way through the Marvel cinematic universe here, and so I think, and I was like, why did he pop into my head? But I was just thinking how, I think something I really admire about his character. I'm not saying he's perfect, but like he really sticks to his values, and he's willing to lose his friendships or compromise his friendships for the sake of staying with that and holding true, to what he believes and what he feels is right, and I think that not only does that pay out obviously in the way that he supports people and is a cool hero and all that, but I think it actually later on. You see how it actually earns the respect of the people around him, and they value him for that. And it actually brings people closer, even when there was, early in his relationships, getting to know the rest of the other characters in the universe. Like there's a lot of rifts. There's a lot of differences among them. These are people who never would have been friends if they hadn't been brought together here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's great. I love that. I approve that answer. Thank you for submitting that for consideration. Yeah. I think my negative example would be there are many examples, because ever since, when was it? Like maybe the mid 90s, there has been this like unstoppable trope in pop culture in America of the bumbling idiot guy, like the dad who can't do anything right. And his wife, thanks be to God, cleans up all his messes. She's the only intelligent one in the house. And listen, I live out that in my life almost every day. So I get that it is based in reality sometimes, but it really does, like, it feeds this kind of like shame cycle with guys. I think this like implicit thing of like men are terrible, women are the only ones who can do anything good. The one that popped up to mind for me was Phil Dunphy from Modern Family. Yeah. And I get it, because I am Phil Dunphy in a lot of my life. He's a little ADHD. He's a little bit sporadic, but the poor guy is just a raging moron who's like socially inept sometimes. And he has lots of redeeming qualities. Like he's really a sweetheart, and he really does, when push comes to shove, he can stand up. He can be authoritative. He can take command. But by and large, he's kind of spineless a lot of times. And I like that kind of thing I don't appreciate. It doesn't reek of respect and honor, which we'll talk about in a minute here. On the good side, one of the most surprisingly great movies of the past decade or two is, I forget his name now, but John Krasinski's character from A Quiet Place. The dad from A Quiet Place. Yeah. A Quiet Place is just an exceptional movie. I could have a whole conversation about that. But a man who is like just radically connected to his family. The movie opens with the most unspeakable tragedy you can imagine. And you see the way that he helps his family navigate through grief and suffering and hardship. He's a protector. He's a guide. He's a sacrificial figure at as the movie goes on. Just like a great example of commitment to values, to safety, to family. Never sacrifices his own values in the process. Just so good. Man. So here's where I want to transition from that. All these good examples that we talked about from pop culture, you and I have 100 examples, hopefully, of real, actual men in our lives who have these elements, these characteristics of being well connected to others. From your experience, clinically, socially, in your own lives, the people that you've seen, when men are doing well in relationship with others, what is going well for them? What is present? What are they doing that makes relationships work well for men? Ben, why don't we start with you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think a big thing is this idea of giving and receiving respect and honor. I think we as men, I think we can tend to wonder, where is my place amongst the guys around me? Do I have value to the guys around me? Am I able to contribute? And are the guys around me going to have my back when push comes to shove or stuff hits the fan, for lack of a better phrase? So a big thing, I think, is this knowledge that I have worth and value. And I think that, this is a podcast where we're trying to integrate faith and mental health, right? So it starts from knowing that I'm a beloved son of the Father, and that's where my worth and value comes from. But I think it's also important to know that if there's a crisis in my life, that I have people that I can call on for help, and that I would also be somebody that they would want to call on for help. And I think that's a big piece of when we talk about honor, particularly, is that I am somebody who's going to stick around when the bullets start flying. And that's something that I know I have really appreciated in brothers in my life. And I hope that brothers in my life have appreciated that in me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It makes me think of a hugely impactful book for me when I was in college and ever since was called I Believe in Love. And in that book, one of the main questions it asks was, do you know that you are a joy for Jesus? Do you know that you are beloved of the Father, not even just despite your sin and your brokenness and your misery, but because of it? Like he's drawn to you. Our misery attracts his mercy. And that whole idea totally revolutionized my relationship with the Father, and with God, just to know that he wasn't looking for me to be good enough so that he could love and respect me, but rather he saw that he had created me good. He had created me for goodness, and he loved me and he enjoyed me and wanted to be with me, even in the midst of, and especially in the midst of my brokenness and my struggles. And that just totally transformed my relationship with God. And I think it did help my identity to know that, like you said, like that I'm a beloved son of the Father, sort of regardless of whatever comes. And it established me in my identity, but it also I've taken it into all of my relationships with my spouse and with other friends, to remember like how big of a difference does it make when you know that someone enjoys you, or when someone has contempt for you. Like the difference is huge if you just think about that in your life for a moment. And so to think about that and think, what am I communicating to my friends?
Yeah.
Are they receiving from me that I enjoy them, that I appreciate them, that I honor them, that I respect them? And what do I have to do to like get that for them? And I think it starts with, putting yourself, like finding that identity for yourself, how God sees you, and then looking at people and seeing what there is to love about them. And there's always so many like just things to love about them, but also to know that you can love them for just what God has made them for, even if they're not at this very moment living up to that perfectly. And I know that's helped me to sort of, have that enjoyment of the other person. And it's enlivened my relationships with men.
Yeah, I love that, because I think it makes perfect sense, like theologically, relationally, that the deep truth that we have to experience, that God doesn't wait for me to have my whole life together before he will come close to me. That God wants to be close to me. He wants to be near me, even in the midst of the grossness, in the midst of the sin. He wants to save me from all that. And I think that's true. There are reflections of that even in human relationships, that we desire relationships where we don't have to earn the love of another person, that they will be there for us even when we do things to push them away actively, that they'll resist that effort to push them away, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to be best friends with everybody. It doesn't mean that we're off the hook for our actions, because I do think there is this balance. Ben, you were talking about honor. I think there's the great challenge for a man to live into the call to be honorable, right? Like in order to be able to be honored, it's up to me to act in a way that's virtuous, that is the kind of asks for and maybe demands the honor of others, but to have some relationships in my life that aren't dependent on my actions. It's a beautiful place to be in a marriage, in a friendship. John, what would you add to that?
Well, I just wanted to build off of what you were saying, Andy. I was thinking about, how, like, can I ask myself the question, like, okay, I take joy in my friends, but can I imagine that my friends, and I don't think this is a stretch of the truth, but like, am I willing to consider that they take joy in me, that they honor me, that they see good in me, and that they want to be around me, they want to be in my company, they want and desire my help, and they want and desire to help me and to support me as well. I think even just considering that can often be hard, because I think if someone asks you, like, would you support your friend if they were going through something hard? Most of us would say, like, absolutely, hands down, I'd be there, and yet at the same time, do we hold ourselves to that standard? Like, I know it would be a joy. I would love to support a friend myself. And yet I find it so hard for me to desire that someone else would do that for me, and I wonder about that. Like, why is that? Like, I'm so willing to give this to someone else. Why is it so hard for me to receive that from others?
That kind of the challenge of asking for help, maybe the place of self-reliance, the place of pride, things like that, which is a really good transition to where I wanted to go next, actually, to look at the idea of the pitfalls, the weaknesses, the struggles that men experience in friendships and in relationships. What are the things that you've seen, again, either clinically or personally, that are common pitfalls, common ruts that men fall into that really work against healthy relationships, that frustrate healthy relationships, that even if a man would say, I desire a great marriage, I want great friends, I want to be connected to people, that they might have habits, they might have mindsets that don't pursue that end? What have you seen?
I want to hear your guys' sort of clinical terms for this, but yeah, definitely building off of that. It's so easy to not want to invite someone into my life or connect with them, or for me to withdraw when I feel like I'm in a broken place or when I'm not doing well. And even though in reality, my friends would love to be with me and walk with me in those moments, and I would love to do that with someone else, and it hurts me when I see someone who is pulling away, and I can tell, I think they're going through something, and they haven't texted me and haven't texted me back in like a week. I would love to be there for them, but there's this thing that's making them withdraw. So I'd love to hear your guys, more terminology for that.
When you get out to that idea of withdrawal, of retreat, of a man just pulling away from connection to others. John, what have you seen that look like? How does that show up, and why is that such a temptation for so many guys?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think of, I don't know if it's a clinical term or not, but I just think of how fear can creep in there. It's something as simple as, realizing like, man, like the last time I talked to this person was like 2 months ago, or maybe I messaged them and they never got back to me, and I think, speaking from personal experience, it's easy to quickly read into that. Like, oh man, like, did they not want to talk to me, or did they not want to respond? Like, and what does that mean? What does that say about me? Did they not want to hang out? Did they not want to, whatever it might have been, and it's easy to kind of fall into these negative beliefs or these lies about myself, and how those begin to step in and interpret this thing that can be as simple as like a text that went unanswered,
Yeah. Ben, how would you kind of add to that? Where do you see that show up?
Yeah, another word that comes to my mind as you're talking about that, John, part of that fear, I wonder too, is the idea of shame, and like you're talking about these negative beliefs of like, maybe there's just something wrong with me. And maybe that's how that shows up in like friendships of like, yeah, you know what? I'm not worth putting myself out there to like make a bid to hang out with a buddy. Or maybe it shows up in like a relationship with a spouse of like, yep, we had another conflict. I'm just going to retreat. This is just too painful. I'm not going to fight for this relationship anymore. And you see like maybe a man retreat more and more out of that relationship. And I think in a lot of ways, there's an antidote of the word encouragement to instill a sense of courage into men to reach out to one another, to fight for that relationship with their wife, or maybe it's fight for that relationship with their kids or whatever the case may be. But where are we seeking as men instances of encouragement in our life? Are we even asking for people to encourage us as well? And that can be risky too, right? Or just, am I turning in prayer to God saying, God, I don't have it today. I need you to encourage me to do the things that you've asked me to do. And that's one thing that I'm thinking about that I see a lot of times, I think in my clinical work, is when guys start to retreat, is like this, they're buying into this shame rather into this place of encouragement.
That shame cycle is so fascinating to me because I think, I don't want to overstate, and I don't think it's some like universal law, but I do think for whatever reason, for men, shame tends to be at the heart of like every relational problem that a man has. And it's always been like that. Like Adam sins, and I know Eve ate the apple first, whatever, but Adam sins right along with his bride. And so he goes and hides from God, which is the most hilarious, asinine thing he could think to do, like hide from the omnipotent God of the universe. I'm going to hide behind a tree. But he hides because he's ashamed. He doesn't want to confront his God. He doesn't want to confront his wife. He just wants to retreat, pull away, and be disconnected because he feels like there's safety there. And of course, it's the literal opposite. That is the most dangerous place he can be, is off by himself, isolated. Someone like David, who commits this sin, he knows he committed this sin. He had sex with Bathsheba out of wedlock. And then out of his shame, he sends his best friend Uriah to be murdered in battle because he wants to cover up his sin, right? And it just like, we have a couple episodes about pornography, and I know that that's a big source of shame for guys all around the world, that so many things tend to compound and really destroy relationships when that shame cycle gets cemented and men feel like there's no way out. And, you know, in a minute, we'll talk about some of the practical ways that men can kind of restore or reconnect or strengthen relationships. And I think there are ways to really get at that shame cycle. But I do see ways that touches on all kinds of struggles that men face in relationships.
Totally.
I think a way that we try to get rid of that feeling of shame a lot of times is to make it so that we don't ever have to depend on anyone. And we get into this like rugged individualism of I'm going to be the stoic American made man, self-made man. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have like seen that just in your own experiences, or I know from just my own personal experience, I tend to fall into that trap in my own like relationship with shame of like, you know what, if I'm encountering these dark places within me, I'm just going to pretend like they're not there and just be this awesome, like Superman. And then I fall on my face again, right? Yeah. And instead of reaching out to brothers or admitting where I'm wrong or running to the Lord in mercy, that type of thing, is this like, that individualism I think can really creep in, and it's a common trap. I think especially for American men.
Definitely.
The kind of dated reference that I really don't even understand because I've never seen these movies, but the John Wayne trope, you know, of like the man who just like, he's a lone ranger and he does it all himself. And John Wayne, I'm sure that's true. I've never seen him, but like that shows up all through not only pop culture, but just like modern Western culture, right? That like a man, and we really do, like we revere that in a worldly way, that like when a guy seemingly comes from nothing and accomplishes a lot, we don't see all of the kind of external causes for his success. All we see is one guy lifting up a trophy, and we're like, well, look at him. That's the model. I'll just work harder than everyone else and I'll be the best, you know? And it's a lie. And I think any humble, honest man who has experienced joy and success in this life would be the first to admit that it was not only his doing, that he's been supported and connected to other people every step of the way. But that's a serious temptation, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely the content that a lot of men are receiving on YouTube and such too, is very much this sort of stoic, never show weakness is truly like the dominant thing, you know. I mean, to be an alpha, right? You gotta never show weakness. And so, I mean, I think honestly for me, that realization that God sees me in my weakness and he loves me there and he wants to meet me there. And I'm called to encounter others, my wife and my friends and everyone in the midst of my weakness has been really freeing for me. But it is hard. I see, a lot of friends, a lot of guys around who are really into sort of stoic or stoic adjacent type things. And it does feel like, I think that there's a heart underneath this exterior, but it's hard to crack through and connect with this person, because they do seem like they are trying to be comfortable going it alone. So I don't know if there's thoughts on that. But.
Yeah. No, just to build off of that, Andy, I was thinking about, kind of this idea of how it's not the weakness that's the problem. It's that we can't own that we are weak, and that we make mistakes, that we have problems, that we've got shortcomings, and being able to own that, being able to recognize that, like, hey, I have made mistakes before. It's not an excuse. It's not to say like, oh, I'm weak and that's just
right.
Take it or leave it, but like first they will admit that, like, yeah, I'm not, and that's okay. I'm not expected to be perfect, and I don't need to be perfect or strong, in order to be in a relationship, to have friendships, in order to be loved and to be cared for, really at the heart of it.
The episode right before this one that you're listening to right now, dear listener, we talked to Bishop James Conley, who's the Bishop of Lincoln, Nebraska. Wow. Yeah. And he, in 2024, wrote a whole pastoral letter called The Future with Hope in response to his own mental health crisis right around 2020, 2021. And one of the kind of like keystone moments for him that I just really appreciated talking to him was when he was talking to the Apostolic Nuncio here in the United States, and he was saying, like, I don't know how to come back into ministry. He took a leave of absence. He got some good care with a doctor, a psychologist, with a spiritual director. He was able to rest and recover and go back into his Episcopal ministry. But he didn't know how to re-enter. He didn't know how to say to his people, like, why am I leaving? Why am I taking this leave? And how am I coming back? And especially, I guess it was when he was going on his leave of absence, the nuncio told him, just tell him the truth. Like, you don't have to message this. You don't have to public relations this. Like, you get to tell your people what is hard for you. Like, he said, like, tell them you're tired. Tell them you're depressed. Tell them you're anxious. Tell them, just tell them what is happening. And the bishop said, like, that was the best thing. Like, just being able to be honest and open with people. And he said, and I can't tell you how true this has been in my life, that he couldn't believe the groundswell of support and love that he got from his people, that they didn't see him as weak. They didn't think he was an ineffective leader all of a sudden. They didn't doubt his authority. They didn't question his motivations for leaving. They saw a man who was able to be honest. And typically not every time, I get that, but typically when you and I lean into a relationship with that kind of vulnerability, that kind of honesty about our weaknesses, people are usually pretty quick to rush in and to remind us of our value and our goodness and to show empathy in those cases, So he was coming at that from a spiritual, mental, and psychological angle. But I think there's something there, like you were talking about, John, of St. Paul. Like, when I'm weak, that's when I'm strong. And the worldly fallen culture says, no, when I'm strong, I'm strong. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. But we as Christians would say, like, there is power that's made perfect in weakness. And when I deny my weakness, I'm actually robbing myself of some strength that I might be able to express and share with the world.
I think that's great. And I don't know if this is jumping into the next section or not, but I think that something that has helped me as well has been the importance of identifying your values and goals. And when you have those clarified, it sort of, to me, it doesn't matter so much where I am or where a person is in relation to that goal, as it matters more that I have that goal and that I'm striving for that, and that I'm constantly seeking to realign, recalculate, like the GPS has the right address, even if I'm not currently on the right path or I missed the exit. I just think that there's so much value in that, really taking time to decide, like Jesus says as a disciple, like he says, sit down and count the cost, right? Count the cost, like figure out what you're going for. And to me, like if we can have a shared goal like that, then it doesn't really matter so much if I'm this far or that far from the goal. It's what's really important is that we're seeking that. And what that helps with is both, it helps me to, I think, to be more vulnerable or open with my weakness. And it also does, I think, have some practical help with relationships when I can relate to somebody and we can share a goal and can call each other to that goal. So, yeah.
And that makes me think about like when we're able to create this container of like a shared goal, encouraging one another. I think another big thing for guys is probably proximity. We can kind of stink sometimes at just reaching out to one another.
Yeah.
But if we're creating these like environments of proximity,
well, what does that look like? Sorry, that sounds awesome.
or I guess environments of proximity, just being like having these habits of knowing that I'm going to reach out to a friend, or we're gonna get in, like we're gonna share an activity together, or like be in a small group with each other at church, whatever the case may be. When we can create these environments, it does create this freedom to be vulnerable. And then I think it creates this ability to start to express emotions to one another. I still remember growing up when my dad would pick me up from school. He'd say, "Ben, how was your day?" And I said, "Good." And I would leave it at that, right? Like any 11-year-old boy. And he would always say, "Elaborate." And why would he say that? Because he actually wanted to get to know me. Yeah. He wanted to know if something was hard for me. He wanted to know if something was good for me. He didn't want me just to leave it at good. But I think there is this fear within us of like, if I'm express anything that is vulnerable or weak, that's going to be, that's not going to be accepted, that I'm not going to belong there anymore. And I think I think a common mistake that we've fallen into probably in the last 10 or 15 years as a society is we're starting to normalize more and more that it's okay to be vulnerable. But then we get into this mentality that I'm not going to own anything. I'm not going to take accountability for what I can control and what has been hard for me. And I think when we can create this container of it's okay to be vulnerable, we can also create that same container that as men, like you can take accountability and ownership. And that's, I think, been powerful for me of like, if I'm talking to a friend about something that might be hard for me in my life, if they're able to be like, empathize with me, but also say, okay, what can you do about this? This isn't just all somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
That is really freeing and gives me agency in that moment without negating why it's hard for me and my emotions.
Yeah. That both end of like the emotional openness, like whatever the thing is, like, a guy who is having a really difficult time financially and things are not good financially with their family, with their spouse. They're having lots of really hard conversations. A guy who's getting older and his physical health is just starting to deteriorate. Like his belt is a lot tighter than it used to be, and he's not lifting as much, and he hasn't run in about 3 years, and the doctor's visits are getting harder and harder, right? Like things like that has an emotional toll. If it's just someone's marriage that like, or a dating relationship that is just not going well. And a lot of times I think I've seen it for myself, like you were talking about that. And I think it's a temptation for guys that being open about that weakness is good, but there's often the temptation to just say like, and that's the way it is. And to abandon any sense of agency or initiative in the things that I can control. And of course, in any relationship, especially, there's a lot of stuff I can't control and that is not up to me. That would be unhealthy for me to try to control about the other person or their actions. But I do get to make choices and decisions that affect my life and the people around me. So having that great, beautiful, very Catholic both and of weakness and vulnerability, but also the strength of character to move and to get up and to do something to at least try to move the needle in whatever direction I want it to go,
Yeah. A great quote on that sort of ownership or character building was St. Jose Maria Escriva. He was talking about how someone saying, I'm sorry, Father, it's just my character to do this. It's just my character. And he was like, no, it's your lack of character. As Stovir, be a man. I just always think of that. Of like, I really like that. It really, to me, spoke to the heart of like, we can be vulnerable. We also have to take ownership. I love that. Container of vulnerability, container of ownership. Sorry, listeners, if you hear my pencil scratching, I'm taking notes. This is great.
The student sitting at the feet of the master.
Exactly.
My choleric bride loves Jose Maria Escriva, by the way.
Yeah.
And he is awesome. And he also bothers me a lot because he's just such a hard ass oftentimes. He just like, and he has this beautiful pithy way of cutting right to the heart of the problem with no concern for someone's feelings, but in a good way, like in a holy way. Like your virtue is more important than your feelings. Like the quote, some like, I think young adult teenager was complaining about how long mass was. And he said, the mass is long because your love is short.
Yeah.
Just like vicious, but so good. Like that's the stuff I need to hear sometimes. But it hurts my feelings and I don't like it.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not a cleric. He says the things, I appreciate him because he says the things I would never say.
Correct.
So,
Right. Exactly. Like, you can't say that. Well, we kind of already made a seamless transition into this kind of like final stage of, you know, if we've got the common kind of like pitfalls, weaknesses for men in relationships, things around hyper individuality, pride, self-reliance, shame, that kind of tendency to withdraw, to retreat, to just give up my initiative, my agency. What are some other kind of practical ways that men might be able to foster healthy, great relationships in their own life? Anything come to mind?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is once you find an example of it, you know, once you notice like, wow, like I see that showing up in my life here or there, do something about it. You know, it doesn't have to be big, you know, but find some way to lean into that discomfort, you know, of like, wow, I'm noticing I feel, you know, uneasy about this relationship, or I'm feeling kind of nervous about, you know, the situation, you know, and what can I do to lean into that? You know, it doesn't have to be big, you know, but like something as simple as, you know, back to the texting example, you know, because I think this applies to me. This applies to a lot of other people I know. You know, how like if I suddenly notice I didn't text someone for 2 months, you know, like I forgot to follow up with them, like the fear might be like, oh man, what are they thinking about me? And I'm tempted to just, you know, oh, I don't need them. You know, I'm just going to ignore the text. Like text them, just go for it. Text them. And you know, maybe we have to own at some point or apologize, like, oh, hey, sorry not for reaching out. But at the end of the day, let's schedule something. Let's get together. Let's make whatever we were working on happen, you know, to recognize that just because I waited 2 months doesn't mean I didn't still need that, you know, that we still need that relationship. And yes, if it got put off 2 months, all right, but let's own that and let's step forward here now. You know,
it feels like another example of the deep human principle that the hard thing is often the important good thing to do. That it is so much easier to not respond to a text when it's already been 6 weeks and I feel awkward about it, right? It's so much easier to not tell my wife how I felt about my day because it takes effort to talk about my feelings, and it's an uncomfortable. Like even now that I've been trying to work on it for 15 years, I still have a hard time like expressing my emotions to the person I love most in the world. It's hard to tell a guy that I respect and am good friends with about the ways that I kind of suck sometimes and I need to do better. Like it's hard to admit. It's hard to go to confession, for Pete's sake, sometimes. Yeah. Like it is so much easier to do the things that make me comfortable. And what I'm hearing you say, John, is that there is great value in stepping into the hardship, because as much as the ease and the comfort is nice in the short term, what I really desire is connection to other people, not my own comfort. So in the short term, it's going to be easier for like 5-10 minutes, maybe a day or two, but that's going to tend toward relationships that are not very well connected. And it's going to, I'm working against myself if I just take the easy way out too often.
Right. You know, and I'm not saying this rule applies in every situation, you know, but I think it can be pretty helpful to just remember, first of all, relationships are going to be uncomfortable, you know, and they're going to be difficult sometimes. That means you're doing it right, you know? And so just having that simple rule, if it's uncomfortable, you're probably doing it right.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. Just to normalize the human mess a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Ben, what would you add to that?
Well, I was just actually going to honor John for a second, because we have been meaning to get together for a while, and then illness got in the way. And I think you had like a cancellation of an appointment or something like that earlier this week. And you just like on a whim gave me a call and been like, hey, by chance, are you free to hang out? And I wasn't, but I was so honored by that was your idea of what you wanted to do with your free time is you took a step of courage out and just like put yourself out there and said, you know what, we haven't made a plan, but like any chance you're free right now? And I was like, yeah, I wish I was, because that would be the thing that I would want to be doing right now. But sometimes it takes that like courage to actually put yourself out there. And I think that might be a little bit of like a practical piece that I would say is the infrastructures that have supported male friendship have started to disappear, especially in the last probably 25 years or so. Like it's a lot harder to go join a bowling league, right, than it was 25 years ago. And so it takes a lot more effort, intentionality. It's going to be uncomfortable, like you're talking about, John, to like really seek out friendship with other guys. And I think I'm focusing on friendship with other guys because I think that's a thing that I see so often clinically when I'm working with couples too, is a lack of male friendship for guys. And then so much pressure gets put onto that relationship with their spouse, and they're looking for that spouse, their wife, to be able to totally fulfill them, affirm them.
You complete me.
Exactly. And they don't, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like there's such a good to having that, like that bucket in a man's life full from just like friendship with men. And you were actually talking about this earlier, Andy, and I thought you talked about this in such a great way, and the way that like you and Sarah end up like negotiating that as a couple.
Yeah. Definitely. I feel like confident in like how I relate with Sarah, but definitely it like takes more intentionality, I think, to foster those male friendships and other friendships. And so the way that my wife Sarah and I have really benefited over the years is we had learned about something called behavioral activation, and it was a therapeutic tool that really is sort of about breaking the inactivity cycle, like inactivity to depression cycle. And one of the things that you're asked to do when you use the tool is to sit down and look at your past week and really judge like what brought you joy, what brought you life. And from there, like what do you value? And taking all those things together, you can start to see things like, wow, that was cool when I watched Netflix for 4 hours and I did not come away from that being filled up with life, But when I met up with my friend, like that was hugely life-giving and joy-giving. And it was a place of like real encounter, and starting to identify those sorts of things. And what you then do is you're supposed to then look at your week and plan out, how can I plan those life-giving things, those joy-giving things, especially relationships and time for life-giving friendships. How can I plan that into my week instead of sort of just coasting and being very haphazard with what I do? Because you'll very often fall into these things that are not the best thing for you. Quick fixes like a video game, and not taking the time and effort that it really takes to plan out something and get together with someone. And so then what my wife Sarah and I realized though is that we had to take that a step further, because in a relationship, you don't have full control over your schedule, and you have to account for someone else's needs as well. And so we realized that when we had conversations, we now have weekly conversations that we call integrated pathfinding. So sort of a build off of the behavioral activation. And we actually have a podcast episode about it, right?
Episode 24.
Yeah,
Hey-o.
nice. Perfect. He knows the number. Oh, you memorized that, right? Oh, no. But we weekly meet and we actually look at our week ahead, and we talk together about how we can meet those needs. And it's gotten to the point now where not only do we ourselves like look for, okay, when can I get where can I get these needs met? How can I do this? But actually we will do that for each other, where I'll find, Sarah and I will more often actually just be saying like, hey, like she might say to me like, hey, you should really have a board game night this weekend. Like, would one of these nights work? Like, you should text some friends. I'm like, thank you. Yes, that would be great. Or I'll definitely, tell her like, have you talked with, your friend Erin recently? Like, you should totally hang out with her, or who do you want to hang out with? What would be life-giving to you? And often it relates to relational, intentionality. Yeah. And that's been huge. And then being able to actually plan that and then look ahead to it and then have the anticipation of, I know I have things to look forward to, friends I'm going to be hanging out with. I'm not just that. Maybe that's like a separate point almost, is that it's cool to text someone and be like, are you free now? Or are you free tonight? But really the power of planning ahead. And that's actually another level of intentionality when you can actually say like, hey, I'm looking ahead. I love to spend time with you. Does Saturday work? If that doesn't work, does Sunday work? You know, is this something you want to do? Like what's something we can both enjoy and plan out together, so that you can honestly say and answer the question that my wife Sarah and I will ask each other, which is, are you looking forward to this week? And so often it's about, do I have time planned with friends? And we're all encounter each other. Yeah.
Number one, I was overconfident. It's episode 25, not 24.
Okay, 25.
So
Okay, great.
episode 25, check it out. And there's a resource all about integrated pathfinding that you can download that Andy and Sarah have created for you. Number two, I love what you're talking about in terms of being intentional and discerning and looking at the course of my life to see where I get life from connection with other people. It's almost like an Ignatian process, kind of like looking at the course of my past week and seeing where connection with others has been fruitful and where it's been difficult. But even that process takes effort, right? Like it's easier to not do that than to just like play video games or like watch Beast games or whatever. That's going to be a dated reference in like a week and a half. But it's easier to do anything but that. So it takes effort. It takes initiative to go through the process of seeing where I find life in relationships and how I can seek that more. And I think it's really valuable as well to have the kind of understanding about relationships that there is a clear hierarchy of relationships, right? I'm a married man. That means there is one person in this world that I am sacramentally bound to. And it's not even my children. Like my bride is the person that I am responsible to first. And the problem sometimes is that and I think other men, see other relationships as competitive with that one. The illusion that like every minute that I'm not spending at home is a minute that I am choosing someone else over Kenna. And certainly there are all kinds of times that I and other men have escaped the challenges of marriage by doing something else, right? Like bowling, ice fishing, fantasy football, whatever the thing is. We men are good at that sometimes. But with the right mindset, all of our other relationships, all of our friendships with our brothers, with our good friends, those make me a better husband. And that is the time that I spend away from Kenna that makes me better for her when I come back. And it's a really valuable thing to talk about with your bride, if you're married, with your girlfriend, if you're dating, of thinking about that down the road, if you're single. Like, what are the relationships that I have in my life that are not the primary vocation? And how can those relationships serve me well so that I can serve her well? You know, it's not a competition. It can be. So how can I arrange those relationships in a way that's really healthy and suited to my flourishing and my bride's flourishing too?
Right.
You know,
speaking of your bride, that fits with her definition of self-care, right? Where she talks about what are the things that I need to do for myself that help me to return to my roles and responsibilities and other relationships with greater joy and greater generosity. And that's been a super helpful paradigm for us. And
Yeah. Well, before we close up with a challenge by choice for our brothers out there and for the ladies who are listening, for the men in your life, who you are welcome, I very much encourage you to share this episode with the men in your life, but maybe in the least passive-aggressive way you can think of, right? If there's a way to communicate it that doesn't say, hey, moron, here's something you need to work on. If there's a way to do it just out of charity and self-gift, you know what I mean? I very rarely get to pick a challenge by choice, so this is a rare thrill for me. I think a challenge by choice for you out there listening, especially for the men listening right now, is to figure out one step, like John was talking about, to move into the challenges of healthy relationships. What's one of the pitfalls or the weaknesses that you're privy to, that you're tempted toward, of shame, of self-reliance, of withdrawal? And what's one way that, you know, again, going back to Ignatius, what's one way that you can bend the stick the other direction, that you can move against that in an intentional way? So what are ways that you can fight shame with confession, with openness, with vulnerability, with humility? What are ways you can fight individualism by reaching out to other men and to being connected with people intentionally, selflessly, for their good and for yours? What are ways you can fight withdrawal by being initiating of tough conversations, of planning with your bride, of talking about the finances that neither of you really want to bring up, or talking about the in-laws that are hard for everyone. Whatever the case is, what are ways you can lean into the difficulty and really bring that sense of trust and connection to your relationships? Fellas, let's wrap up in prayer for the good of all the men out there, for the people who love them, and for greater connection for all of us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, you are our Father, you are our Creator, and you are the source of life and love in our lives. Lord, we thank you for the gift of the men that you have put on this earth, to be your servants, to live as your beloved sons, to love those around them, and to be in healthy and holy relationship with you and with others. Lord, we pray for each of us men and for all the men that are loved by those who are listening. We pray for their flourishing, for their well-being, for their sense of comfort and meaning. And we pray, Lord, especially for healing in any ways that men around the world feel alone, feel like they have to do it themselves, feel like they don't have what it takes, any ways that they feel cut off from you or from others. Lord, help all of us men to have a greater sense of courage, a greater sense of purpose and meaning, and a greater investment in the relationships that you desire for us. We ask for the prayers of St. Joseph, of all the great man saints throughout the years. And we ask all this, Jesus, in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Beautiful. Gentlemen, what a joy. Holy cow. It's been great. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, John. Thank you, Andy. It's been great to have you, and I'm sure that we'll have you back on the microphone sooner rather than later.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No problem, man. It's been fun. Friends, if you enjoyed this episode, again, feel free to listen to it again. Feel free to share it with a man that you love and care about. And you can share it by checking out our website at thiswholelifepodcast.com. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook at This Whole Life Podcast. And you can also send us all kinds of feedback. Where have you seen these pitfalls or real strengths show up in your life? What have you found to be fruitful in your relationships as a man or relationships with the men in your life? Can't wait to see you next time, friends. On behalf of all the gentlemen here in the room, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
You're not alone, you're not alone.
This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com.
You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
Make it clear for everyone.
Mine's sort of niche and sort of not.
I
So.
feel like all your references are niche.
Oh, thank you.
Even the way you pronounce niche is a little niche.
Is it niche or niche?
It's technically niche, but I'm not that fancy.
Okay, got
I
it.
do the American version where we make it sound gross and
That's awesome.
abrupt.
Yep.